Welcome, everybody, to the Legendarium Green Team. We're in Spooktober, and you know what that means. Stephen King time. Today, we're going to be discussing Revival by Stephen King. And with me, I have the Reverend Wombat.
Hello, everyone.
And the fifth business of my life, Jingles.
Ouch! Oh my god! Hola! Jeez.
I feel like whenever I do these intros and jingles in the episode, it's just always like a weird burn, semi-burn or something.
Just gotta run me right into the ground. Oh my god!
I don't know.
That's fine. I am happy to be your nemesis, Yeti. I will every day.
Is it nemesis or just someone who pops into your life throughout the years? You can't
Well,
escape.
in this particular context, it's a nemesis, right? So
Stay tuned. So we're going to be discussing Stephen King's Revival. It came out, I want to say 2014. It was like mid 2010s. I'd say it's probably one of his lesser read books. It's I tried before this episode to look at like sales numbers, impossible to find for King, like opening weekends or bestseller list. It made the bestseller list, but I think it was one of the quickest ones to fall off, which says something about it, and maybe we'll talk about that. But before we get into everything, I do want to give like a little bit of a warning about this episode. It is Spooktober, so this is a horror novel, but it is, we are a fantasy and sci-fi podcast, but there is fantastical elements, but it is an existentially dark novel, and it has to deal with religion and death and grief. So if that's not your cup of tea, I think none of us here will be offended if you tune out and listen to one of the other episodes we released this month, which might be spooky but not make you want to curl up in bed at night. Or at least if you listen to this, listen to it at 10:30 in the morning. So just a fair warning. So let's start. Let's do Jingles, my friend. Before we get into the book, what is your relationship to King? Maybe the first King book you read, ballpark how many, and some of your favorites.
yeah. So I started reading Stephen King when I was in 6th grade. I had picked up my 6th grade teacher, she realized that I maybe was interested in horror and was maybe ready to pick up something a little bit more advanced than what I had been reading. And so she gave me The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon as my first Stephen King book. And I loved it. I had heard of the guy. I mean, I don't think anyone who grew up in the 90s and 2000s didn't know what It or The Shining was, probably, but this was my first actual book of his. And then a family friend of ours had heard that I read that, and he pulled out his entire collection and let me borrow them. So from like 6th grade to 9th grade, Stephen King was the vast majority of what I was reading. I was actually trying to look to see where the cutoff was, but I've been reading King pretty steadily throughout the years. I know that there is this point, I want to say like maybe it's Desperation or Rose Matter, where I've read everything up to that point, and then after that it was kind of pick and choose as they came out, and I found myself being interested in them. So this was my first time reading Revival because I hadn't read it at that point.
Wombat, I know we did, for listeners who have listened, Wombat and I with Little Red Book did Carrie. And I know in that episode you talked about your relationship to King, but if you want to fill people in, maybe some of your favorites, what the first one you read is, and if you had read Revival before.
Yeah, big King guy, like Jingles, young age. My dad actually was the one who got me into it. I want to say my first novel was The Eyes of the Dragon, because he knew I was into fantasy stories, and that's one of King's more kind of fantastical works. And I want to say the Gunslinger might have been for 2. I like Jingles, read pretty much everything he wrote until like probably around Revival. This is my second time through Revival. The first time I read it was 2017. It was like my last deployment in the Marine Corps, so my memory's a little fuzzy of it. So the reread was great for multiple reasons, because I actually I went into this thinking like, oh, I remember this book great, and then that was not the case. So yeah, I love King. He's great. Glad to be into some of his maybe lesser known might be the right word for it. Glad we're covering kind of one of these King novels.
Sure. I would say, compared to you guys, I don't think I've read as much King as you have. Probably like 15 books now. My first one, I didn't start reading them till my early 20s, which is probably sadly 15-ish years ago now. But and the first one I started with, I got to go back when I had unlimited time, was Under the Dome. And I was like enamored with that book. I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. It's like an epic monstrosity of a book just set in one bubble of a town with so many, a huge cast of characters. They all come to life. It was viscerally gory. I remember, like, vividly remember the dome coming down sometimes on people. So, and I was hooked ever since. But I hadn't, I like, I don't know about you guys. I do these things in my life where I like, will check out, same thing with movies, like the lesser known stuff. Cause I'm like, I don't need to see Casablanca right away. Let's watch, Bruce Willis in a River Cop movie from the 90s. And I think I did that with King a little bit, where I read lesser known stuff, like some of his short story collections, one of which had like Jerusalem's Lot, which is like a sequel short story to Salem's Lot, but I've never read Salem's Lot. So a lot of weird bumping around like that. But yeah, I read probably Revival around the same time as Seth did. And for reasons we'll get into, it stuck in my head. And it horrified me more than any of his books did. I know that for a fact. I don't know if it was the best book I've read by King or in my favorites, but I just remember after reading it, like that one generally kept me up at night, which, we all three of us read a ton of horror. Not all of them do. Even if I enjoy a horror book, it doesn't always, keep me up. But this one definitely did.
Yeah, I think like for this one, I've come to really appreciate horror that's kind of just lending itself to a certain style, um, which we can get into more with this one later. But like this book feels like the most for an author who has done a lot of homage and Easter egg dropping and very much wears what he loves on his sleeve and puts it into his books very willingly. This one feels the most um this one feels like the most Lovecraftian or pre 1920s horror that I've read of his in a while. Like Under the Dome is a great book because it feels authentically King in that it's one of his big tomes where he takes a whole town and just watches it fall apart. And this one, he does his coming of age very well, but he also is very clearly taking notes on, Frankenstein and the Great God Pan and Herbert West Reanimator. So very much playing with all those fun aspects of Lovecraftian horror.
I should say he was deeply inspired from this book by Lovecraft, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and do you remember what the book was called, Jingles? This one more than everything.
Yeah, it was The Great God Pan by Arthur Machen.
Yeah. He said he remembered reading that as like a young age, I think, either in his teens or even before that, and just horrified by it. And he had this idea for a book and thought it was a fascinating, horrifying idea from that. And it's been kicking around his head since then. So, and you're the only one brave enough to read that book.
It was good. I kind of wish well, no, I actually am glad I read it before because then I could kind of anticipate where we were going, and it was fun to see how that played out.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't have time. I wanted to. Just after this book, I'm like, oh, I gotta read what horrified King. But yeah. So, all right. Do you think? Well, I guess. just before, I guess, before we get into spoilers, just without, as much as you guys can, Seth, as much as you can without spoiling, just did you like the book? Your general thoughts on your reread, better or worse than you remember it, or anything?
Yeah, so I went back, looked at my Goodreads. I didn't get into Goodreads till like just probably 5 or 6 years ago. So this was a few years after I read the book the first time. And like 2019, me gave it 3 stars, and I was like,
Ooh.
"Excuse me, what?" Yeah. So I went into it thinking like, man, was there something I didn't like about it? I still like the book. I liked it more than 3 stars. I'd say it's a 4 out of 5 for me, if we're just going broad strokes. I think it hits a lot different as a parent. I'm a parent now. And we'll get into that. But yeah, I think it was really good. Like Jingles, really liked and appreciated the kind of lean or the nod towards the Lovecraftian in this one. It's a I wouldn't say unusual for King, but maybe not his flavor like all the time. But I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
And Jingles, your first read, just thumbs up, thumbs down. You felt like
Yeah, big thumbs up. I found myself really enjoying this one. I know that the ending can kind of catch people off guard, it seems like, based on what I've seen, but I thought it was great. I really love the sharp change in tone. I don't even know if it's really that large. I think we can kind of see where it's tracing from the very beginning, but
Sure.
yeah, this is a 4 out of 5 stars for me.
Yeah, I agree. I had it rated 4 out of 5 stars. I think it's one of his most underrated books. That's why I kind of wanted to reread it and talk about it with you guys. I wish this was kind of talked about like it, The Stand, and all the others, because I think it's just, if you can, I don't want to call it, my favorite book of his, but it's, if everyone talked about it and loved it, I'd be, that countercultural. Maybe it's not that good, since it's so low key. And let's just jump into it because there's just so much to talk about and why I love it. All right, spoilers ahead, everyone. So if you haven't read it and for some reason you wanted to listen to us vent in the beginning, tune out. We're gonna go in little parts through the book, and I'm not gonna recap everything right away, but let's start with the beginning of the book. And it's about Jamie Morton, who lives in Maine. He's like a 6-year-old kid, has a typical family with a mom, dad, a few brothers and brothers and a sister, and essentially what happens in this town, they get a new reverend, and this young, cool reverend comes in. His name is Charles Jacobs, and he kind of approaches Jamie playing in the dirt, and there's a memorable scene about soldiers, and makes a good impression, meets his family, and just a stand-up guy whose wife and young son moves to the community and really blossoms in the community. And you just King at his best, showing small town life and neighborhoods and that main feel that you get in his books. Eventually, tragedy strikes, and the Reverend's wife and son are killed in kind of, is it a drunk driving accident or
Um,
It
he
was a
was
seizure. It was a seizure,
it was
like an
a seizure,
epileptic.
yeah.
yeah, that's right. Someone had an epileptic seizure, hit them head on. Uh, just incredibly gruesome scene where the wife is walking, like missing an arm, skull ripped up. His child's face is ripped off. He finds them and essentially, Charles Jacobs breaks. He totally breaks on religion. Has this thing called the terrible sermon, his last sermon at their church, and just goes off on the whole town about the con that is religion. And it kind of shakes everyone to their core, especially young Jamie, who looked up to him, and and the whole his family and things like that. And then after that, it kind of follows Jamie growing up a little bit in high school, learning to play the guitar, having a crush on this girl named Astrid, and really King just doing the Stand By Me thing with that awful tragedy in the middle. So let's just start with that whole section. And I just want to, what your thoughts, I guess, are on my big impression of this is just like, this is the start of like what grief does, what grief does to people and what grief does to a town. So Wombat, let's talk about Charles and, what happened to his family and the grief from that accident, because that was the big moment in this section, I think.
Yeah, I mean, God, it's gut wrenching, to read as a dad. Like, uh, that whole scene, like, we, I'll say the scene I'm thinking of is we're in the mortuary. He knows that his wife and kid are dead, and they're like, let us get them ready for you to see them. And he's like, no, he's been there a bunch
Right.
of times. For people in the community, he knows the way. It goes back, and then the POV is him screaming, where's my boy's face, right? Uh,
Yeah.
brutal, brutal. And so King has done this in a lot of stories, and I think this might be his best example that I can remember. Pet Cemetery gets talked about a lot as a novel, kind of ruminating on the idea of grief and what grief would do to someone. But this, I think, is maybe even more powerful. Here you have like someone who's a pillar of their community, uh, a reverend, a man of faith, and then we watch his faith get shattered, right?
Yeah.
And you get to the terrible sermon, and you start hearing the stuff he's saying, like all this terrible thing that's happening in the world, and you find out he kind of has like maybe this transactional view of faith, like, hey, like, I did all these things, God, right? Like I did all the things you were supposed that you asked me to do, and then this is the thing you give me, right? Like you were supposed to give me the good thing. And yeah, I mean, it rocks the whole community, right? And it kind of talks, there's a section in there that was interesting too. I come from a really small town, so like how the community took that sermon, took that incident and kind of spun it in a way, right? Where they're like, well, someone said they smelled alcohol in her breath, right?
Right.
Maybe it wasn't a tragedy. Maybe it was like she did this somehow or something, right? Like they're trying to find ways to justify this.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's just gut wrenching. I like that the POV in this section too is from I can't even remember our main character's name, Jamie. Jamie's POV as a young kid. Like this will be something we'll probably talk a lot about through the episode. But like looking back on your life, like maybe there is someone that's come in and out of your life a lot, had like huge impact on you, and the Reverend, for better or worse, is that guy for Jamie. But we also learn about Jamie here, his fascination with electricity, right? And how he incorporates electricity like into his sermons, right? He builds like this kind of maybe this just speaks to what kind of nerd I am, but like a D&D like mature like
No, that's absolutely the correct vision. I totally agree.
like table with a pond, and he has like this track on it, and he makes Jesus like walk on water. Essentially looks like he's walking through water through the power of electricity, and he talks about electricity a lot in his sermons. So like he has what, I don't know if I want to call it a hobby, maybe a fascination or something. Like we know he has this idea of electricity that's a lot more than like what the average person was. And he talks a lot about that, like people taking things for granted, right? Here's this miracle of electricity, and we just take it for granted.
Well, I mean, before the accident, he healed Jamie's brother. Jamie's brother had a condition where he couldn't talk anymore. And,
Yeah,
he brought him
hit,
over.
yeah, hit in the neck with
A ski
ski
pole.
pole. Yeah, and that's an interesting one. Like he builds, I think like basically like a TENS unit, right? What we would know
Yeah.
as a TENS unit. Zaps the muscles a little, gets him to contract. And he's like, well, I was tricking his mind, right? He's trying to play it off like this wasn't anything crazy that I did. It's just that your brother could talk the whole time. I was just giving him the confidence to like be able to speak again.
To actually try and speak, because he totally believed that he although we learn this later is not true, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But but yeah, this idea that um, uh, that oh my gosh, why am I forgetting his name? Charlie. That Charlie has um, y- like you were saying, a transactional deal with his faith, and that is also very strongly represented by um, his faith in, well, maybe not faith, but his kind of obsession with scientific discovery and following through with the electricity and um, trying to fuse them together, which in some ways may be what causes all of the problems in his life to begin with. Um, because he opens a door that is not necessarily meant to be open or seen.
Oh
Um,
boy.
yeah, I don't want to get too far into outside this
Yeah, yeah.
section, but I think it's interesting what this piece is doing with all of the parts of Charlie's faith and what he is and how easily he strays away from it. I'm not saying that like death of your family is a hard thing to a hard thing to bear or manage, but he gives up on it almost immediately.
Well, it's just an interesting case of when example of when life just has arguably has no rhyme or reason of why things happen. And I think as humans or people, we always try to like instinctively try to look for why did this happen, what caused it, or they ask God, why would this happen to me, or things like that. And Charlie, just the inability, um at first to deal with that life is like an assassin. I think someone says at one point, they can take you swiftly for no reason at all. It's just there's nothing to it. And so he kind of has this crack where he just said everything like Seth I worked for, what God tells me to live a decent life, to have a good family and do good in the community and things like that, and you will be rewarded at the end. And to have something so vicious, so just morbid happen to your family in the prime of their lives or the very beginning of their life is just how can you even compute that other than to just fully kind of rage against what you formerly dedicated your life to. And as he said, he calls it an insurance scam. You pay in, you pay in, you pay in, and then you find out at the end there's not even a company at all that you're paying into. And yeah, to me, it was just that was like one of the most gripping things, just seeing that character totally become unhinged. And it's you put yourself in that shoe, someone you loved, you can't blame him at all. Like I didn't come away from that section being like, oh, that guy's a villain.
No,
you know
absolutely not. Well, and it's kind of interesting too, like looking at like also the social components of this, because the town does give up on him rather quickly after the terrible sermon.
I
Um,
would say the town does, but Jamie's parents were really empathetic, and I
Jeremy's
loved
parents
that about
tried.
them.
Yeah,
Just talking to Jamie about that, saying, that I think his mom gives a talk about empathy, like don't lose empathy, because I think she wanted him to share something. It's really on the first pages, but his dad, um, would talk. I remember talking to him about the Reverend after that, and just saying, he's not crazy, he's not mean or anything. I mean, that's a man who went through something totally horrific. But the rest of the town, yeah, kind of just like you said.
just bails on him. I mean, like they after the terrible sermon, they just kick him out completely. Which, yeah, hard to say if that was a trigger for anything for him, but I would guess it probably um, had some sort of influence because he does get left with nothing except for his hobby.
Well, it's interesting. Like, he his life, his wife, his kid, and his faith all are either gone or taken from him. And in the later parts of the book, you're like, oh, what a natural segue, right?
Yeah,
To this thing that he's interested in. Like how that could consume his life. Coupled that with the experience of actually helping um Jamie's brother, right? Like he might be playing it off, but we know with later in the book, right, that he knows that he helped him, right? That it was this electricity, this unit, this thing that he built that actually, helped his brother. One of the things I want to bring up now and then maybe again is like, do we think Charlie is a villain? And if he is he one of the most sympathetic King villains like of all time? Right.
I'll touch on that a little bit. I think the experiments he did on Connie, I think Jamie's brother. At first when you're reading that, he's like, "Oh, this is just a great guy who's like, obviously following the teachings of God and helping out when he can." But looking back after everything goes on in the rest of the book, it's like, oh, from the very start, this guy was experimenting on people. Like, and he was like, he always, he had a dedication to God, but even before the accident, he had a dedication to this secret electricity as well. And he was always tinkering, even though they didn't show it. But anytime he could, he would. More important to him about Khan's voice coming back was seeing if this experiment would work. So there's always a little bit of selfishness in him, and not only selfishness, um, curiosity. One of the books is one of the quotes in the book is, "Curiosity is human." And so yeah, I mean, he's definitely portrayed as the villain in the book. I think he's. I don't know. I actually. I don't know. I was gonna say I'm leaning towards saying I don't think he's a villain. Um, he goes on these healings throughout the book where he heals people over and over. Jamie finds out, and they have really bad side effects. But the one person had like stage something cancer, and it's like, would you rather deal with that, or would you rather get healed and get to live more longer? Maybe you're eating dirt. Um, I guess that argument kind of goes away when we find out in like the epilogue of the book.
Yeah.
We'll get to that, but I think it's interesting. Like in context, the beginning of the book, we have one example of him using this electricity to heal anyone, and there's no side effects. Right.
Right.
The only thing that happens is that Jamie's brother can talk. Right, and it talks about how the family at the time had just acquired like an oil company. They didn't have the funds to go get a specialist. Like they were in dire straits, right? And they're tore up that their kid can't talk. His brother's tore up. Like, there's a scene where Jamie comes in the bedroom and his brother's essentially mouthing a scream at him to like get out. He cusses at him. He could read his lips enough to know, which is very unlike his brother. And so it's interesting to think like, okay, the guy's family dies, and the only experience he has, like I think, really saying like, hey, I'm going to use this as a medical experiment, is a positive one, right? And so the parallels to some of the Pet Cemetery stuff are
It's a real good
really
book.
strong.
Really
Yeah, and but what's so powerful about that is like, I thought about this a lot. Like, why does Jamie keep interacting with this man throughout his life? Like, this book spans decades, like many decades. And it's the power of a first impression, right? He talked about that. Jamie's like playing with his army men, those sweet little like plastic ones that hopefully you had in your childhood. I know I had them in mine, and
Oh yeah.
he has this cool first impression where like Charlie teaches him like a flanking maneuver with the army men and all this stuff. And then after building his trust some more, he saves his brother, right, from a tragedy. And so then that really sets up the rest of the book. Like there's a part of this section that I didn't love, and I'll get to that. But the parts with Jamie and Charlie, particularly when he's young, all the way up to Terrible Sermon, was like, I loved it. I could not get enough of it. I was so engaged. And when you look at it through the context of like the whole book, when you have the ending in mind, it's like, man, like I see how we got from A to B and B to C. And it felt like to me, this is my second time through, so I'm curious, Jingles, if you felt this way. I knew where the story was going this time, right? And it felt like I knew this train was gonna crash.
Yeah.
And it was like I knew it, and I kept hoping they'd get off the train or slow it down or stop it. And it's just, I think it's such a well done. To me, it felt so well done, like the build to the end, right? Like you're like, oh man, you have every chance to walk away from this, right? And
Yep.
like Yeti said, it's curiosity, right? Even Jamie kind of at the end, we'll get to that. He talks about it, but I was curious. Your very beginning of this book, this first section, did you have a thought about the end? Do you remember what your headspace was? Did you feel like you were on this train towards impending doom?
Um, Only in the most like meta sense. I mean, I'm reading a Stephen King book, and I don't
Yeah.
get the impression that like this is going to be one of those really feel good ones because he usually doesn't take a whole book to write those, right? um, but honestly, no, I was curious. I wasn't 100% sure what I was supposed to be um, feeling for Jamie and for Charlie and their interactions through most of the beginning of the book. I think at some point when um, King is describing the fifth business, he does mention, he does use the word nemesis for Charlie. Um, and I genuinely actually got kind of confused when Charlie left for the first time because I was like, wait, these two seem really great, like friends. And um, Jamie even set like shouts that he loves Charlie before Charlie leaves. Uh, and
Well, we only went to
honestly,
visit him.
yeah, he was the only one that went to visit him, like of genuine like love for the person that was there, not just to help him and um, just out of a duty, a sense of duty to go take care of him. But um, where was I going? Oh, I was kind of to your point of how these two keep interacting with each other. I think that shout of "I love you," like in the most awful way, is exactly what ties Jamie to Charlie throughout the rest of this book, um, because they, the forces at work, do not want kindness. They don't want happiness. They don't want any of these things to take place. And so they had to keep bringing Jamie in as a key. At least that was the what I was running with. I had no idea where we were actually going, and I I can't say that I actually knew what the heck was actually going to be at the end of this until it actually showed up because there is one hint I think throughout the rest of the book that this is the thing that we're going to be looking at. And actually, no. Now that I say that, I think there are two, but one of them is incredibly subtle. So,
Yeah. I mean, I definitely had, I remember going through the first time, just this immense amount of dread. I was just like, I was uneasy the whole time. It was different parts. Like, I was like, Charles, like a molester. Like, but there's always something where
yeah,
I'm like, just there's none of this feels good. Like throughout the whole book. Um, you know, so I remember writing like, it's kind of revival reads like as a slow dread toward the finale of the book, much like life. It's just as um, but yeah, it's let's uh let's go forward a little bit. So like I said, Jamie gets into high school, starts playing guitar, gets recruited to join a high school band with older kids, kind of meets Astrid, a high school girlfriend. But then he gets into his 20s just playing in bands, around jumping around the Chrome Roses, little Dark Tower reference with that. Eventually, he gets into, I think, a motorcycle accident or some sort of vehicle accident. A little parallel there to a certain Stephen King, and gets hooked on drugs, opioids, into turning into just a huge junkie. Not only that, we find out during this period in his 20s, as he's gigging and doing drugs, his mom, I think a little earlier, his mom had died, and then his sister dies. We don't find out how his sister dies till later, but I think we can say now that, she dies from her husband going and shooting her. She's a teacher and going and murdering her and killing himself. But during this period, as he's a junkie and just going to gig, he gets fired from one band because he just doesn't show up to a show because he's passed out on drugs. He ends up in Tulsa, goes to a carny show, and lo and behold, who does he see but the Reverend at a new job doing carny tricks, essentially, with electricity and pictures. And that's kind of where we find him. He sees it, passes out, and the Rev heals Jamie of his addiction. He healed Connie first. Now, with electricity, he healed him from being a junkie. And it scares Jamie, but it also brings them closer. And what did you guys, Jingles, what'd you think of, I guess, their reunion, so to speak, where Jamie wasn't his point in this life, but, specifically the reunion between him and Charles?
It's a weird one, for sure, because the dude just does kind of show up randomly back in his life. There's no, um, it feels like fate because they just have no connection at this point. They've been separated from each other for 20 years. They're both doing completely different things. And when he shows up and he does this healing, then the only thing that's in my mind that's triggering this idea that something is up is because it's a horror novel that we're reading. Um, but he does these really fascinating things, and it's actually kind of cool to see how he has developed his electricity powers or skills or whatever they are, his machines. Because he's doing these really cool things where he's like taking this picture of a woman and she shows up on a giant painting behind him, and she gets a picture that she can keep forever. But we are in the carnival stage, right? Um, and we know like carnivals are full of cheap tricks, and this is one of those things. Like this painting's or this picture is gonna disappear in like 2 years, but she'll have it until then, and she'll that hopefully by then the fun of it will have worn off, and she won't care that much. So
Mm,
we already see how he's kind of already making these exceptions to these rules of giving people what they want.
mm,
Um, and then when he finally does heal Jamie of his addiction, it's again one of those things where what he promised is exactly what he's getting. Um, but there are some side effects that are not discussed, primarily because um, the Reverend doesn't seem to think that they're they're collateral. It's okay that these things are happening because
yeah.
you are better, right? Like we said we were going to fix you, we fixed you. It's all good, right? No problem. Um, so I'm glad that we also see in a really minor form the picture of the girl does lead her to do some chaotic stuff. um, just as like another guidepost there saying like what he is doing is not good. Keep
Yeah.
that in mind. Remember that.
Seth, before you touch on that, you said you didn't like a part of the book. Was that back when, if we backtrack, about Jamie and his like high school days and the music stuff with Astrid?
Yeah, it is. To me, that was a part of the book that drug the most. And I try not to read too much into this stuff because, I mean, ultimately, Stephen King's an author. I've never met the guy. I don't know him. What I do know about him is that he plays guitar in a band. Music is
Yep.
important to him.
Yep.
That he was in a car accident and got hooked on opiates.
Yep.
Like, from his own admission, he's said these things, right? That's not me reading between the lines.
Yeah.
And part of me was kind of like, all right, I get the love letter to like the music, and it all starts with the kid. Like, how many times do we hear that line in the book? I think
Yeah.
that might even be like one of the last lines of the book, right? And um, this is the part where I think I struggled with it, and I could see other people struggling with it. Like, all right, because that's actually a large, probably a large section, probably 10, 15, 20% of the book where Charlie's just not around, right? Like we get this
Right.
pretty sweet kind of prologue-y introduction, you know, that's pretty substantial length. Actually, it's almost like a novella length, and then we take this tangent to kind of catch him up. That's maybe the one thing that probably brought it down to like a 4-star for me, if I was just nitpicking.
I do think he probably did that to enhance the idea of the fifth business. I don't know if we explained it too much, but I guess there's the term the fifth business is like a movie term where someone keeps coming into the main character's life throughout their life, periodically jumping into their life that they can't either get away from, or fate or some sort of thing keeps bringing them back together. So if the whole movie had, or the whole book had Charles, it probably wouldn't be as effective. Hence why they have these little cut ups of, yeah, like you said, him going through his life in the 20s in bands or with his high school. It shoots back later when he's in Colorado. We'll talk about when he's uh, gets away from Charles again. So I think those little periodic things were to enhance that idea of the fifth business. But I agree, it's probably I don't say the most boring part of the book, but there's no horror sections of it really. It's stuff he's done before in other books, probably better. This kind of young teenage kind of life. I still loved it. I could read him. I could write that stuff all the time. um, but yeah, and I think it was kind of just a setup to his drug abuse and stuff like that. But I agree.
No. I think like the one piece that I appreciated out of that section really was like the more Astrid focused components.
He needed
Um
that.
because he needed that. Yeah, I think Astrid and Bree are really the only two people that Jamie really has any true connection with outside of the Rev throughout the book. Um, and it was a lot of the coming of age pieces, like after the first time they have sex, I believe.
I was just gonna say, I don't know how many king sex scenes I can
Yeah.
read anymore of like young kids.
It's a lot, but there is one line that kind of stuck with me where she says that she's glad that he was her first, and as a child he didn't really understand what that meant, and eventually he would come to understand it. Um and I just feel bad for Astrid that she has to get pulled back into this at the end. But I there is like some value to having this person that the Rev eventually manipulates to keep Jamie in his life, right? So
Yeah. But yeah, Seth, what do you think about the Rev going full Carney? I mean, I think that was probably an exciting moment when he jumped back in.
My hot take might be that this might be my favorite kind of chunk of the book, maybe just
Oh,
like
wow.
all around. I really like where Jamie's at, right? Like he's not only is he sick, he's detoxing, he's malnourished, like he's in this just pretty rough spot. And then it's like, oh, here's this guy. But one of the parts that felt really sinister about it is that Charles takes him to this warehouse. Uh, I think that's where he got treated, right?
Mhm.
I think,
Yeah.
yeah.
So he takes him to this warehouse, and it's this massive warehouse in the middle of nowhere. Charles kind of pontificates and is saying like about how cheap he got it for, and when Jamie gets in there, he's thinking like, God, it's so cool in here. Like the temperature's down. Like it must cost a fortune to cool this place. And you get a few lines, and they almost feel like throwaway lines, but it's like, oh, like I figured out how to make power and make it cheap, right? And I don't want to draw too much because then they're gonna like wonder. The people will start wondering what I'm doing here. So it's like obvious that he's doing something. He's also found out something fantastic. Like think about the real world implications if he were to share uh these discoveries, right? Like clean energy that's not nuclear. I mean, he laughs because I think Jamie asked him like, "Oh, is this nuclear energy?" And he laughs. He's like, "No, that's a waste and a dead end, right? Like I found something better." And he just waves that away and marches on. And that's when you're like, okay, like if it wasn't clear before, uh, you know, Reverend Charles here, old Charlie boy, is up to something, and
Yeah.
and maybe it's not a good something, because this is when I started feeling like, before we find out the side effects of the gal, is it Connie? She was one of the Carney folks that got a picture, right?
Yeah.
So we still don't have any real negative side effects to this point. Jamie hasn't even had the part where he wakes up and he's like trying to stab himself in the arm with a fork, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, like, all things considered, if you could be cured of addiction and that was like the worst side effect you had, like, most people would probably sign up for that deal, I think. But
that's how I kept thinking about it. So, like, going through the
Yeah.
book, I'm like, because it's
Yeah.
like when you say he's a villain, I'm like, well, dude, I'm a drug addict. I'm probably gonna be dead soon or in jail. Like, this is a pretty big win. I can take that.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. You just know he's like Jingles was saying, like he knows there's going to be downsides, and he just doesn't even care to share. It's not even like there's a fine print warning label. It's just like, well, you said you wanted this dealt with, or whatever, right?
He doesn't even
I
hang it
didn't.
over him like that until
No,
the end, kind of. But I think in his mind, they're all just like mice to him, and he just, is
He's
helping.
I mean,
keeping
It's
him
like,
at a distance so he can watch them.
and
And
it's a scratch your back, scratch my back kind of thing. He really doesn't see at the time.
yeah. I mean, is it the most ethical thing? Definitely not. Does it make him like, uh, you know, the worst person ever? And we'll get into the very end. He starts rattling off some statistics because Jamie confronts him about it. But this is when I felt like, oh man, there's a sinister side to him, right? Like,
yeah.
Well,
not only we get all this backstory of Jamie, but we don't know where Charlie's been for the
you know what
last
though, Wombat? Like
15 years.
you brought up ethical, and I don't think he cares because he lived his life ethically, and what happened was his wife and child were brutally murdered. I even don't think he thinks of it sinisterly. He's just like, what's ethical have to do with any of it? He's
It's
like,
that, yeah. It's like that transaction piece. He's decided, okay, so I can't have this transaction with God, but I can take this transaction upon myself with other people.
yeah, with these
Right.
rubes, which he
Yeah.
obviously is starting to. He's not fully there, but he's definitely has a distaste for people. But even if he doesn't have it for Jamie, he's just he doesn't even. I don't even think ethically crosses his mind because that went out the window so long ago in his life, where it's just like, I think I'm curious because I experiment with these secret powers. I think it'll help you. I can test it, and you can be healed, and let's find out. And yeah, the side effects he doesn't even, you know, worst case goes wrong if something happens to Jamie. He's not, it's not like God's going to be angry at him in his mind because I really think that, that car crash altered his thinking completely in that moment. Whereas like, that's why like it's such a good question about, is he sinister? Is he evil? I just think he totally, what you do in major grief, who you hurt around, hurt around you, yourself. It's a whole rewiring.
Well, it is interesting. There's the sinister aspect of it to me is not necessarily him not disclosing that there might be side effects. It's more like, I've invented clean energy. I've found it. Like I've found a way to power our grid without putting toxins in the air or splitting an atom and all the things that come with that. And he tells no one. Well, correction, he tells Jamie. But Jamie's just like, I don't know what this means. Like, this guy seems a little like, he's in a weird state of mind, right? Jamie's in a weird state of mind, especially in this section of the book. Like, he's really going through it about as bad as he can, Uh, so it's just, that's the part where it's like, dude, like, where I guess where you start to see just how self-centered Charlie's like become, like,
Yeah.
and how much it's about this mission that he's on. He's asked point blank in this section, like, what is your goal here? Nothing.
Well,
Crickets. Right.
it really shows because Jamie becomes his assistant for a little bit. We left out and helps him doing the Carney thing for a bit. And that girl's father at one point comes up and months later and like punches the Rev in the face because she is
Right in the
starting to have
face.
having things go wrong. She's shoplifting, sleepwalk shoplifting and stuff. And that's, I think, when you first see the Rev not really have any guilty feelings at all about it. As where Jamie's kind of horrified and he's kind of Rev's like, it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, what's strange about her too is she is the one person that we see where he didn't actually do any sort of
Right.
healing, as far as
Didn't
we can
heal her.
tell. He just injected her with the electricity, um, which I guess is our telltale sign that something else is going on because it doesn't have to necessarily do with the healings. The healings are kind of just a benefit of this whole situation, for the people temporarily, as it turns
Yeah.
out. But yeah, I mean, there's like the medicinal implications of all this is you can do chemo and not be certain if you're going to get rid of your cancer, or you can get rid of it for sure and it will not come back.
Right.
Um, or you can get rid of your addiction and you'll never want to have anything to do with a drug again. Um, and is eating dirt so bad in that case? No, not really.
And I do like how the way I read it with Jamie is like I don't even feel like he was super desperate to be healed. Is more like brought back to that curiosity thing. Like, could this actually work? It's like
Yeah,
kind of big theme of this book is people are just curious for better and most of the time for worse.
yeah.
um, yeah,
And it's an adult that he had a tremendous amount of respect for as a kid. I mean, this is the guy who, we didn't really talk about it, but in the terrible sermon, Jamie does lose his faith. Like he just completely gives
totally.
up on religion at that point.
He sees what the Rev is saying. I mean, I think that's why they have a connection where he's like, yeah, I kind of am with you on this stuff. you know, that makes more sense to me than the other religion you were spouting before, like the Methodist stuff.
Yeah, and some part of me thinks like Jamie and Charlie are kind of two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
But Jamie hasn't had quite, well, I shouldn't even say that. Jamie's sister
Yes, bring it
has
up.
been violently murdered, right? And
Hmm.
A huge link
um,
between them. Huge link.
so there's so many parallels between them, yeah, and the loss of faith happening at around the same time and a tragic event, and Charlie might have been around the same age as the Reverend. Might have been around the same age when he lost his sister that the Reverend was when he lost his wife and his kid, right? And like
Jamie, yeah.
they're kind of going down. They are going down this road together. I mean, that's kind of what the book is, right? Like they keep coming back to it.
They're both
Um,
addicted.
yeah, they're
I mean,
both.
Jamie gets addicted to drugs. The Rev's addicted to this secret electricity. I mean, they're totally parallel what's happening to them. They both lose some. I love you that you brought that up. I mean, his sister violently murdered. We don't find out till later, but I mean, they both have this same path of grief that makes them hurt themselves, either makes them hurt themselves in Jamie's case or makes them hurt others in the Rev's case.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Just I appreciated that aspect. Like King is such a master at that kind of thing to me. Like kind of the flawed protagonist or flawed main character, or like there's so many. It's so easy to see how they get to where they're going, even though where they're going is not where you want to be, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you can. It's very easy to sympathize with these characters sometimes. Maybe too easy, because you. I mean, that's part of the dread, right? Of feeling and understanding. Like, um, another book of his, Doctor Sleep. Seeing where Danny Torrance is at the beginning of that book is just. I've very fortunately have never been addicted to anything in my life, drug wise. So it's one of those things that, I have no way of understanding what this can actually be like. But
A
um
Robin Hobb book's a drug in case.
yeah, right. But I can Stephen King paints the picture very, very clearly for me. So
Yeah, I will. To your point, Wombat, this probably is the best section of the book. I really like. I love him catching up with Jamie when he's like Jamie's kind of laying down. He's trying to get him drinks in him and what they've been up to. I really love the scene when he first sees him at the doing his picture thing, and the way it's written is amazing. Where he's Jamie's just kind of shook that he's seeing him again for the first time and what he's doing, and then I think it says like, and then someone in the crowd faints or something like that, and he's like, and it was me, you know,
Yeah.
or whatever. But yeah, that was a great direction for it to go. Let's move into. We'll go out. So essentially, they split ways. Charles essentially dumps Jamie again. Jamie gets it dumped again, this time by Charles, and he says, "Hey, I got a friend in Colorado who owes me a favor. He'll give you a job. Head out there." And so Jamie goes to Colorado. I think it's called Neddington or something like that. And he works at, what is this, like a dual, like a ranch, but also like they make a music studio. So he helps produce music for bands and things like that, while also hanging out with horses. This must be based on a real place.
It
And
totally feels like something out of the 60s.
I know. And he's clean, and he's got a great boss named Hugh. Workers he really enjoys, a great apartment. He's a stable life, seemingly fulfilling life. Doesn't stay in touch with his family, still alive family, but compared to where he was, he is doing great. And we're like, Jamie made it. He's even playing a little bit himself, I think, or teaching kids, teaching people. And then, of course, him and his boss, I think his name is Hugh. They stumble on that the Rev was on TV, and he is now a blown tent revivalist preacher, where he goes and he gives sermons in these tents. People come in who need to be healed. He puts on a big old show. He has singers singing before. Al Stamper sings and does this stuff, and then he gets chicken guts and pulls out their tumors and saves everyone. And he's got quite a following. And he's on TV, and so they decide to go see it. And essentially, he's doing the same old things, except he's older and he's gone full. They're just even more unnerved than ever. Jamie is, his boss is. His boss has some sort of panic attack, runs out and says, and he said, "What happened in there?" And he said, "Everyone looked like ants, and like there was this other place that came up." And Jamie's like, "It was just me." He's like, "No." He said, "I was there. I didn't see anything." He's like, "You were an ant too." He turned and looked at me. And just a really kind of morbid, uh, just weird scene and just disturbing. So Jamie is pretty much on full red alert with the Rev at this point, that something is not right. He's not the person he knew from when he was a kid. And I guess when we stop there, we talk about, let's just talk about that, where the Reverend essentially going into fully, I think, hating people, and is just using people as rubes to get what he wants. Do you agree with that, Jingles, essentially?
Yeah, I do. I think at this point, this guy has gone full Ahab. I still have no idea what he's going for, but I know that people are no longer on his mind, right? And he's continuing to justify his actions with these. He's continuing to justify his actions with these. Well, I'm healing them, so it's all good. And yeah, the percentage of the ones don't that do heal and do weird things, it's very small, so it's an acceptable loss. Um, and then also to add just on top of this, his character has evolved from being uh, a carnival con artist to being
Yes.
an actual messianic figure for these people. So he has full on taken again that kind of that step from take losing his faith, taking the transaction that he assumed with faith, and now also calling himself God.
I
Not
think this is
necessarily in so many words, but
I think he thinks it definitely. I think this is the point in the book where it's like Charlie's full on attack on religion, exploiting it, kind of shoving it in people's faces that this is a sham, and the readers' faces that this is all just a ploy for me to. It's just it screams fakeness, and many people, even when presented with it, don't don't understand, won't see it.
Yeah.
He's disgusted when people thank God when he heals them. He's like, he looks at Jamie at one point like it's not God. It's me. Don't get the credit. And just yeah, it's clear to me in this section where he's fully turned into just having a disgust for the human race and religion in general. Sound about right, Wombat?
Yeah, I wish I had something beautiful to add, but you guys are killing it. This is I can't remember if it was before they went to the tent or after. I want to say it was just before, where they shared their stories with the Reverend, like how they met him.
Oh
And we
yeah,
actually
that's
find
great.
out that
Yeah.
his boss had been had a breakthrough with a band, and
Mhm.
then had some kind of issue where he had like some sudden onset deafness. He'd lost his hearing, and he meets the Reverend in Detroit, and actually gets healed by him, gets his hearing back. But one of his side effects is that he has a name for it, and I can't remember off the top
The
of my head.
prismatics.
The prismatics, yes. Um, where he's essentially seeing things or seeing like the world differently for a short amount of time. It's like very unnerving kind of episode for him generally. And then that's where Jamie shares also that, it has dissipated with time, but that he would wake up like jabbing himself with a pen or like some sort of object, right? Like that he was
Right.
still mimicking his drug use or previous drug use. And so they go into this tent knowing that there are some side effects, right? And uh it's creepy, like he's um I don't know, I really liked that scene. I thought it was really it showed a lot, right? Like just how much Charlie was like using the crowd. I mean, Jingle said it the best, right? He's just kind of made himself into this like messianic figure, godlike figure. He's even crafted like this false narrative backstory. I went on
Oh,
like
right.
I wandered into the wilderness and prayed to God, and He delivered to me this ring, and which we know is like this very cynical thing because he doesn't. Also, he's lost his faith, and that he made the ring, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
I
so
love that he lies too about his family's death, which Jamie calls him out on, and he gets upset. But he tells the crowd, my family died in a drowning
they
accident.
drowned. Yep.
Yeah, they
Yep.
drowned, and it's like, yeah, he's just fully blown exploiting.
Oh, yeah. And he asks why are you lying about that? And it's just because they don't have a right to know.
Yeah, I love that line. It's
Yeah.
just like encapsulates what happened to Charlie exactly.
Yeah. Well, and how we didn't talk about this, but when in the previous section, when Jamie had been kind of living with Charlie, getting back on his feet, he found a photo album of Charlie's wife and kid, and these like the thing was like basically falling apart. It had been thumbed through so much,
Yeah.
right? And you kind of start putting like, wow, like some people are able to. I don't say you ever get past grief, but like live with your grief, like actually live, right? And it's clear that like Charlie is not living, right? Like he's stewing in it. He's like live. Yeah, he's that like he can't accept it, right?
Yeah, I
And so
found that
this
the
is
most
where like
relatable.
yeah, oh yeah, and it's I kept looking back and I'm like, gosh, do you blame the guy? Like, you know, now again, I don't agree with a lot of his actions, but like, it's hard to. I don't know. For me, I
Yeah.
was like, it's pretty
Well, if like
sympathetic.
if my kid or my partner died like that, I think I 20 years on would be looking through photos of them too. I think I'd be
Absolutely.
so broken that it's like I was like, of course, he's looking at them. I will say I thought brings up a good thing where it's like the book title is called Revival. And like in the
Yeah.
very beginning of the book, what after that happened, I'm like, oh, he's going to try to revive his kids or his kid and his wife. I was like, that's obviously what's
Yeah.
going to happen. And then when he was looking at those pictures, I thought that too. But then, we see him now, he's in a revival tent. And it's like, it keeps you on your toes a little bit of what this book actually means.
Yeah, I was going to mention something similar. Revival starts to mean so many different things here.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I mean, especially in like this day and age, like even if you were trying to separate yourself in a way that allowed you to move on, like my iPad regularly just shows me pictures that I forgot I even had.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think you can ever fully avoid that. And having a tool that might be able to help you in some way to gain that back, while perhaps a little misguided and eventually seen as completely misguided, um, it's hard to not think that I wouldn't try, right? Like
Yeah.
if the option's there, maybe, you know.
Yeah. Um, would you guys say this was, to me, I'm not as experienced with Lovecraft, but that scene with the ants and the shimmering of it, that's when the Lovecraft stuff started like clicking for me. I was like, oh, this is that kind of feel. I don't know if it happened earlier for you guys, but for me, that was definitely when I felt it.
Yeah. So I'll say for like up to this point, this entire book is feeling very Lovecraftian in the way that it's actually formatted to me, because there are many stories that Lovecraft wrote, um, that were originally serialized. So you do kind of find yourself coming to different stages in a person's life, um, and we get their experience in that section. And
Mm,
then we move on to the next one. So that in itself felt Lovecraftian. It also felt a lot like Arthur Machen at that point because he did the same thing because he was also a serialized author. Um, so, but then yeah, then you start getting the actual horror components in this scene. So we actually start getting the prismatics, like I don't know if you've read a lot of H.P. Lovecraft, the guy likes telling you that there are colors that you can't properly discern as kind of the key sentence to tell you that something is horrific. Color out of space being the biggest example. Um, and then yeah, just the strange things that kind of pierce through the veil and you see like creatures that shouldn't be there and things. Those are all very similar in that way. Um, and again, kind of like Lovecraftian in the sense that we're talking about themes that all accumulate together. This also feels very much like Arthur Machen's work.
Mm. I really liked he doesn't stew on it a lot, but just the rumination of like faith and science and how they interact and can they coexist. And um, this scene in particular stood out to me. You're thinking about the same thing, right? Like he's playing it as a religious thing. We know that it's being posed as a scientific thing. By the end, do we really know what it is? But um, yeah, I mean, I agree. I thought about the color out of space too with the prismatics. It's a great short story by Lovecraft. You should all check it out for spooky season if you haven't. But so Lovecraft also, I feel like, had this really great way of writing, like a kind of an impending sense of doom. Yeah, like you knew something bad is going to happen. I mean, obviously, we know reading Lovecraft 100 years later that that's kind of his shtick. But uh, this is the part of the book where I really started to feel that, like, oh man, okay, like if I didn't know where we're going, I got a good feeling I know where we're headed now, and it's not going to be pretty.
So we're getting in the dirt now. That's what we're doing.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Well, we're almost there. Before we get to that, I'll say this chunk of the book maybe my least favorite. But essentially after this big thing, Jamie kind of makes a decision to like do a bunch of research on the Rev, because the Rev drops out of the spotlight eventually, and he's like he wants to know exactly what happened with him, with everyone he's healed. He enlists the help of one of the women he works with, her daughter, who's a computer programmer, a computer science major. even though they're essentially just Googling, but he's an old man. So he's like 50s and he's like, I need your
It's
help.
really
She's like,
impressive. Yeah.
yeah, it's like we're just Googling stuff. But and obviously has a relationship with her, older, younger one, which I'm sure he enjoyed writing. But most of that book is just this portion is them doing research until he finally finds out where he is. Charles is back in Maine, secluded, only has Al Stamper and maybe one other helper, and he goes and confronts him about everything he's doing. And essentially, Charles is old, has some strokes, but he said, I have my last great big project, and I need you to help me. And don't, and they have conversations about the subjects, and that's when we're talking about where he's like, well, what's better? I healed them. A percentage of them might have some secondary issues, but the majority are fine, haven't had anything. And he said, what is the problem? And they kind of come to verbal blows. Jamie insults him a little bit, and then he leaves, but um, Charles says, you'll be back. We'll see each other again, as they have so many times over so many years and decades. He said, you'll be back. And so Jamie goes back. I think he has more lovemaking with his young girlfriend before she moves to New York. But before we get to the ending, yeah, what did you guys think of that this portion? I guess him just kind of hucking around in Colorado. I guess this is where we really see the horror of, like, we're talking about the other people he's healed, what happened to them.
Yeah, we get a lot of exposition that's mostly statistic gathering, right? And
Yeah.
data gathering. Yeah, I mean, I'd say this is the slowest part for me as well, but at this point I've been so invested in this book that like I'm just flying through this portion really because I'm
You
like
just want to get to the
I
end.
know something's coming. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
I know what we're building up to. I want to say at this point though, one of the more interesting things for me is this was the portion where we also got to see kind of Jamie's reconnection to his family.
Oh, great call. This was a great scene.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I mean I love this in particular. Like there's a new, was it great niece, grandniece, great grandniece? I don't know exactly what the connection is, but
Right.
it's one of his brother's kids.
Mhm.
She's just turned 1 years old. Terry, one of his older brothers, is turning 65, something like that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's all that important, but
It's a big family party where
it's a big
everyone's
family party. Yeah.
family's coming from out of state, including him. And yeah, his
Yeah.
brothers is three. He has two brothers left. Right.
Yep. Yeah, one of them, the one that actually did have the most religious growth, yeah, aging. Uh, Jamie actually saw a premonition. Yep, saw a premonition of him dying because of something, and he called his brother, and his brother was, "No, there's no way. I would know. I would know because God would have told me."
Well, that was a
Um,
really interesting. We should have brought that up. His brother dies. He said, "Hey, you should get this checked out for like cancer." Right? And he like
mhm,
push him. He waits. He says like he waited too long for it. And you think, oh, he died from cancer. But he said they found the cancer. He did wait too long, but he got chemo and he got through it. And then he ends up dying in a totally different way, just having a stroke like a couple of years later after beating cancer.
yeah.
Just another totally cruel, like someone who dedicated his life to a certain way and cruel fate of life.
I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lie, when I read that part, it made me think of like the Final Destination franchise.
Seriously, yeah.
Like
It was
like
like,
death
no, you
death
cheated
death will not
this.
be cheated, yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah, brother. Now we're talking.
Um, but yeah, so he meets this little girl, and the little girl absolutely loves him, and we get like this actually very sweet and sincere interaction with all of these people that he's kind of abandoned his entire life or kind of ignored. Um, and it's it's the most uplifting part of the entire book. As he gets to be with all these people again, even like some of his old band, he plays with them for a while. Um,
Yeah, at the party, they play
yeah,
a couple songs.
it's like this really interesting, just calm before the storm, right? Is I think the entire purpose of this structurally is just we're gonna have this one point of brightness before we get way bleaker than we have.
Yeah. Yeah, I think yeah, I mean, that's definitely true, but I also think it's him kind of pinpointing what at least King or I don't want to say what he thinks, but what's important in life or what like sticks with you in life, is, the memory, like heartfelt people in your life that either playing music, which is important to him, and the bandmates. And there's some nostalgia to that, They know they're not as good as they used to be, but they're still doing something that brings them joy in the moment,
Right.
before things went bad, before sister died, was murdered, his mom died. And he's seen the scene with his brothers all reconnecting and giving a big three-way hug, is really kind of nice. So yeah, I really was moved by that whole section, to be honest.
And yeah, Seth, kind of like what you were talking about of them being two sides of the same coin, is this is Jamie embracing the family he has and not just obsessing over the family he's lost.
And it's also something the Reverend just doesn't have, whether from his own fault or not. I mean, he never moved on to get something like this. He always
Yeah.
exploited people. He didn't, you know.
Well, that's why I say like most they there's a scene where they're talking about their sister. Like he asks his brother, his older brother, do you still think about her? And he's like, all the time, right?
Yeah.
He's like, but I don't want to talk about it because it's basically a short road to nihilism, right? Like I can't dwell on it, which is, I mean, is the difference between Jamie and Charlie, right? Like
Yeah.
the fact that you don't ever get over heartbreak. You just learn how to live with it, and but you can live with it, right? Like
Yeah.
Jamie is finding a fulfilling life with his family. Like it is the most, by far the most upbeat section of the book, uh, and you do feel good about it. You're like, oh man, he threw like one last gig with the Chrome Roses and hung out at a birthday party and just like all the good, fun family stuff. And um, I loved that this scene came when it did because what comes next is like, oh, all right, yeah, I see where their paths really diverge, right? Um, I actually really loved this section of the book. It's probably in strong contention for my number one. So
I'll say it has one of my favorite quotes. I'll say now. It's I think it's Jamie says it. He said that's what home is. Home is where they want you to stay longer. I was like, oh man, you're gonna bring the waterworks on me here, King. Jeez, take it easy.
yeah, Stephen Hobb.
Steve-
Stephen Hub. Let's get
sounds
that
like
collaboration. Let's go.
sounds like my fidelity accountant or something. All right, let's get into the end of the book. It's arguably the most memorable section of the book, the most diverse, not diversive, divisive part of the book. So Jamie gets a letter from Charles saying, pretty much blackmailing him, saying that Astrid, your high school sweetheart, has stage 4 lung cancer because she smoked all the time, blowing cigarette smoke into Jamie's mouth as they kissed. And he's like, I can save her, but you will have to agree to come and help me with my final project or my final experiment. Of course, Jamie reluctantly agrees because he's still in love with this girl, I guess, after all these years, and goes up. We see her get healed by Charles. There's an emotional reunion between Astrid and Jamie, all these years later, and we find out that the big experiment that Charles wants to do is he has a woman who he could not heal. She has this rare disease, and she is moments away from dying, essentially. And he has a nurse ready. And the moment she dies, he is going to use the big pole where in that cabin where um, what's his face, Jamie and his girlfriend first had sex in that cabin place, and revive her. And when he revives her, he wants to know what she sees, what she saw after death. He wants to see what's behind the veil. He wants to know what it was, how his family are, what are they doing? And essentially, this is obviously what he's all been working up to, but it's Charles' big fu to death. He's like, I am going to no matter what cost, I'm going to get one over on death after what it did to me, and it's piercing the veil. Unfortunately, as we've had clues throughout this book, there's something called Mother behind there, some being, and we find out that essentially after death, there's just an army of evil ants making us all slaves, and we are being fueled by they're whipping us and torturing us and putting us to work for the null or something. You guys can explain this a little more clearly with the Lovecraft thing and maybe the stuff that it had to do with other King books, but there's this huge power in the Mother, and it's just a horrifying, terrible ending for us when we die, apparently. And Jamie, they try to get sucked in there. Jamie shoots this woman, closes the hole. Seems like Charles dies or Jamie kills him and makes it look like he killed himself. And Jamie's scarred for life. He leaves, and there's a little epilogue where we can talk about that he gets help in Hawaii and his brother, and they're kind of in therapy and stuff like that. But what else is there to say, Wombat? What did you think of the ending second time around?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about the Lovecraft side of things. This felt super Lovecraftian. Like monsters that you can't really explain, that don't make a lot of sense. Alternate realm. At one point, like a creature's trying to crawl out of the dead gal's mouth, or so it appears, right? And then you find out in the epilogue that like a ton of the people that were treated by Charlie have gone mad, or like have some crippling,
Including
his brother. Yeah.
and his what's her I can't remember her name now.
Astrid.
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 Yeah. His
Yeah.
murder suicide.
Yeah, yes. So all this work to save Astrid, only for it to have gone horribly wrong. And there's a bit there. It's interesting because like Charlie has the ability, not Charlie. Charlie always had the ability to stop this. Jamie.
Mm-hmm.
Jamie has the ability to stop it, and Charlie's like,
Right.
"Well, don't you just want to see?" Like, I'm just trying to look through the keyhole, is what he says, right? And
Of course.
you're the key. Like, I'm just trying to open the door and just take a gander. And so in a way, like Charlie is the demise of the thing that he was trying. Not Charlie. Jamie is the demise of the thing he was trying to save anyway, right? Like he had the ability to shut this down. If anyone has ever listened to me talk in our Discord server or on an episode, they know that I probably am a real sucker for tragedies, team tragedy, and this ending scratched all the itches for me. I see complaints about it. On Goodreads, it seems like a love it or hate it. Like you either love it or you hate it. I'm firmly in the love the ending category. Carried the book for me. Makes me want to just inhale some spooky books for the rest of the year.
Absolutely.
Really set the tone. So no, it was great. Yeah, gosh, even just sitting here thinking about it's getting me hyped up. Great ending.
Yeah. I'll touch on my thoughts, but Jingles, it was your first time through. How'd you feel?
Once we got to this, I was like, oh yeah, I was expecting something like this to finally happen, and it did. Like, we're even getting to the point where like the Frankenstein of it all comes in, where I think at some point he actually says it's alive. Like um I have and this is also where the King fan theories start coming in and stuff. But I this is the bread and butter, and same. So this is my favorite part of the entire book. Is just like what a turn to make, um, and to the people who were like it's kind of silly and out of nowhere. I completely disagree. I think we read a whole book where this guy was marching to something, and I don't know necessarily what the expectation was. That I definitely didn't think it was supposed to be a tame finale. Uh, we had a lot going on there, so yeah, I really enjoyed it. Um, it's tragic. It is incredibly tragic. I like personally just thinking about the idea that whatever these things were had been kind of infiltrating people's minds this entire time while he's healing them. And then once they realize that their chance to get out is gone, they just go ahead and take all those lives. That's horrible.
Yeah.
So
I
devastating.
I can all right. Yeah. So I'll talk about this ending. It's why it's so scary for me. It's for me personally, and I don't want to get too depressing for anyone, but I'm not very religious. I'll put it out there. I think when we die, it's nothing. It is just back before we were born. It's the whatever unconsciousness, and that's always like clearly for me just been the most horrifying. Still is, continues until I go. Will be the scariest thing in my life. And so to play with this idea that, there is something after you die, but it's not nothing. It's a perpetual hell essentially of being tortured by these ants creatures and a power. And it doesn't matter if you're good or not. It's not like, oh, you have to be good and you'll avoid that. You do good in your life. It's like this is coming no matter what. There's nothing you can do. You have a slow march towards it. You can't kill yourself and get out of it. Like there's nothing like this is you've seen it and this is what it is. And the fact that you know, you as people we kind of trudge along towards it is just deeply unsettling to me. It really effed me up putting my shoes. Like, what would you do? There's nothing you couldn't live your life the same knowing that. And I think Charlie says that, or not Charlie, Jamie says that in the beginning of the book. Like he wishes he didn't have the knowledge of what he knows. Uh, so it's like, yeah, the idea of ants doing that silly because, I think a lot of people's reaction is like, oh, it's not that, in reality. But in this case, you're putting yourself in the story and like, oh, this is that. And that's like, if you can put yourself in the mindset, like that is, that is just a suffocatingly uncomprehensible idea. And it's just, I don't know. It's one of those things that like, it keeps me up thinking about it. And again, it doesn't still, I don't know. To me, it goes back and forth. I go back and forth. Like, is that worse than just nothing knowing, maybe you can have like an uprising with the people to defeat these ants, but you can't. I mean, so anyway, that's kind of where like the fear for me, comes into that.
Yeah. And I totally agree with you. I think my view is kind of the same. Like, the idea that something is out there for you to look forward to and it is not good at all because something I was thinking about, and this is totally me just adding on, King
Sure.
intended this or not, but just the idea of ants being like very,
Yeah.
very effective workers, and they are the ones that are shepherding you in this
Sure.
place, uh, is just horrifying.
I had a really different read of it. So I think maybe my initial read years ago was something similar. It's too hard to know for sure because it's just been too long with too many books in between. But um, I thought like, okay, we glimpsed at something, and that is terrifying. Like I could see how that would just be mind breaking to our characters in the book, and as like a depressing thing. But like, is that just hell? Is there a better version? Is this king playing with the idea of a multiverse, which he's been known to do? Because in his multiverse, there is some terrible entities, some terrible places. Like we don't know, right? Like it's just what we know is that there is this forces that we can't see, but that we can harness the power to go do something or somewhere. But is it, what's to say there's not a different force or something like that? And so getting into my I'll just tie this in now. Like, if you've read a lot of King, I thought a lot about the beams and the powers of the beams and the idea of King's extended universe. And I won't go any more into it than that, because if you know, you know. And if you don't, read The Dark Tower.
I do find it interesting, leading up to this uh, episode, I did listen to a lot of King interviews specifically for this book, and multiple times people asked him, are you religious, or things like that, and he said, I'm not, religious, but I do believe in an afterlife. He said, I believe there's a greater power, and I think there's something out there, not necessarily. He doesn't think the ant thing like it's bad. He has an optimistic look on after you die, which is to me surprising. And they asked him, how can that be after what you write? And he said, well, how else can you live? He said, I choose to believe it like anyone else does. That's just my choice. It helps me through life, and and it's just interesting that he's just so matter of fact about it. It's kind of just workmanlike. Well, it's like that's how you get through life. You don't, and I don't know if I totally agree with him, but it's just I just thought it was a fascinating take with him and reading this book, the two different opinions of that, I'd say. But
Yeah, and the thing that makes me think like this realm is not like the definitive end all be all is there's a section before this where he's talking to Charlie. Charlie has like this little tiny laboratory essentially.
Yeah.
And he's tapped down into the earth and this secret electricity, and Jamie's asking him like, how did you learn this? Like, how did you figure out about this? And like come to find out that he has like some ancient texts that were banned by like the church and stuff like that, right? And so it all comes back to like a religious component as well, right? Like, well, maybe the church was onto something when they banned that, because that's the road to hell or something, right? Or some form of purgatory or what have you, insanity, the whole kit and caboodle. And so it's interesting. I think all the way until the end, King is like, playing with that idea, like faith and science, faith and science, faith and science. Like we're just bouncing back, and it's like, at the end, King doesn't tell us any answers, right? It's up to us to kind of figure out where we land on it.
In very much the Lovecraftian sense, he leaves it up to your interpretation because that's almost worse, right?
Yeah, because it's our imagination is worse than anything he could put to page, right? And Jamie kind of, he talks about that at the end, right? Like you were saying, Yeti, like I wish I hadn't seen it, because he's probably taken this and built on it in his mind, right? Like,
right.
We fill our memories in with a lot of stuff, too, especially things that are incomprehensible or mind bending, right? Like traumatic. Like our memory is not to be trusted all the time.
Yep.
So I love it. It's absolutely my favorite type of ending, because it's just mind bendy and alien and all the stuff that you just want to, like, I can't get enough of it.
Yeah, I think there was a quote somewhere in there where it's like, too much knowledge isn't good for a person. But
yeah, and I think it's I mean, it felt clear to me. I could be wrong. You guys tell me if I'm crazy. But it felt like Charlie was firmly in the land of insanity by the end of this.
Yeah.
Right? Like he'd gone full crazy.
And he completely blacked out for like 12 hours or something, right? I think at the end. Yeah. No, I think there's just to kind of add more to the nihilistic aspects of this book, which it's with, he does not take his own life, but he does end up going to be near Connor, and in that process finds a psychiatrist that helps him maintain his sanity as much as they possibly can. and he's constantly fighting that. So it's like the one life Mother couldn't take, but it's a constant struggle.
Yeah, well, he's got an enemy in Mother now because he kept saying no, no, when she kept trying to come at him and denied her essentially, or essentially denying death, or But yeah, it's funny. Therapy, antidepressants. He says getting him through it. Just like, but then he goes back to like visit family, and the niece that loved him now can just sense.
That something's totally wrong.
Yeah, and won't even go near him, and is just horrified by him. So it's kind of poisoned him even being able to go back to his family, and that little good part that he had, that was snippet we saw, is totally like a poison well after this.
Yeah, and I think it's really because he really had the option to walk away at the end. Like
Yeah.
he and instead he let curiosity lead him to this place. It turns out this place was not good. To put it lightly.
This is it, Wombat. This is when you just said that. It totally speaks to that decision right at the very end. He said, "This is how we bring about our own damnation, by ignoring the voice that begs us to stop while there's still time." And that was literally the end of the book, where and we all have those moments where we know we shouldn't be doing something. We're like, this is definitely a bad path to go through, but it's tempting or whatever, and maybe it won't be so bad. But
Yeah, I mean it is such a human thing, like it is I think maybe a uniquely human thing where we're just like, nothing will happen to me, or it's my lucky shot, or just
Right.
just a peek, just a gander, or whatever, right? Like, I've read enough of these books that if was ever put in that situation, I'd like to believe that I know how this story ends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully we are all literate enough to like open this. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's kind of, in a way, it's easy to see how he got there. It's just like he had, you see the life he could have had in the section before.
Yeah.
And he kept pushing, right? Like he kept on with it, which is just,
Well, it's like,
it just adds to the tragedy.
I know we said it a million times, but it's like, it's that human curiosity, because even like the black man with Astrid, it's like he hadn't talked to her in forever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not like it's throughout the book, it's his lost love that he talked about all this time. He barely ever talked to her, except some of the memories, nostalgic memories we have when we're younger. But it's like he did it. Like there's no gun to his head. There's no, he kept doing it because at the end of the day, he wanted to see too. You
Yeah.
know, he wanted to see where Claire is. He was, his brother's at the exact same reasons Charlie did.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's actually a good point to try to bring in um, this passage from the very beginning of the book. I think it's like 3 chapters in, or not, sorry, 3 pages in. When I think of Charles Jacobs, my fifth business, my change agent, my nemesis, I can't bear to believe his presence in my life had anything to do with fate. It would mean that all these terrible things, these horrors, were meant to happen. If that is so, then there is no such thing as light, and our belief in it is a foolish illusion. If that is so, we live in darkness like animals in a burrow, or ants deep in their hill.
Oh, ants deep in the hill, you say?
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, it's just like this idea that on some level he has to believe that there was some free will happening on his part to just try to that curiosity was driving him. He was not fated to deal with this struggle.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, it's the whole theme of the book. He didn't have to. He could have stopped what he saw, like with the choices he made. Just like he could stop going to that place by being a good person, like any religion teaches you, by living a decent life. Like we need the idea that if we do these things, make these choices, we could avoid that. You know. I don't think the book lends itself to believe that that is possible, but every reading. So let's go back to the very first, maybe one of the first things Seth said in this podcast. I don't know if we fully addressed it, but Seth, do you think Charles Jacobs is a villain? he's probably one of the most sympathetic characters in King's thing, but is he a
I
villain
do
in
I
your
do think he's a villain. Like I think you can do good things maliciously or with malicious intent, and um, he. I think up until the end, like you have a strong case to say like that he did far more good than harm, right? And then he pushes and keeps pushing, and a lot of the good that he did was irreparably damaged, and um, Astrid kills herself, and the nurse that and her partner, like at the end of the book, um, Jamie's brother is basically a vegetable, like, uh, and he did that for purely selfish reasons, and so it's hard for me to square that with somebody who I just personally believe is like a decent human being, um, which is crazy, and it's so true to life. Like we are all maybe only a couple decisions away from like what someone might consider a villain.
Breaking
Yeah.
Bad?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I wanted to bring it to this quote with that thought. This is from the wedding section in chapter 10. And again, if you know, you know. But here's the quote. Life is a wheel, and it always comes back around to where it started. This
Right.
this idea of life being a wheel, the circular nature of life and the universe is a very king uh, king heavy thought and theme through his works.
Yeah, I haven't read it, but I am assuming that's a Dark Tower reference.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a subtle. I mean, it's a subtle nod. I love that though. It's just this book also in a microcosm. Like it starts with tragedy with the Reverend's family, and we end with tragedy, right? Like we did come full circle, in some type of way.
Um, we'll try to wrap up here. Do you guys have any quotes you want to read before we get to Easter eggs? I've got a couple.
I've got another quote. It ties into an Easter egg, but I didn't realize it was this direct until I just looked at my quotes. Chapter 4, quote, "What's the name of the band?" Norm said. "We used to call ourselves the Gunslingers, but people thought that was a little too, militaristic." End quote.
I mean, Gunslinger's the name of the book, right?
Among other things.
Gunslinger,
Yeah,
among
there's
other things. But
other things. Okay,
I like that Stephen King seems to be maybe taking a jab at himself. So.
Yeah. That's good. And go with the Chrome Roses instead. I have one last quote. I think I've kind of mentioned all the two throughout, but this is Jacob's. I can't stop seeing the damned. The line stretches forever.
Oh my god. Foreshadowing all through this thing.
Right? That's what I love, all the little foreshadows through the entire book. I also actually kind of again on this good deeds go punished theme that we kind of see throughout the whole thing. This is a quote from the Doctor right before Patsy and Maury die. Probably shouldn't have been driving at all, except maybe the fields, Dr. Renault said later. But how can you ask a man in Georgie's line of work to give up his license? It's not as if he has a wife or any grown kids he can put behind the wheel. Take away his driving ticket, you might as well ask him to put his farm up for sale to the highest bidder.
I remember that one.
Yep. Doctor making a decision for a lot of other people in that case. Yeah.
Right. I think this is Jamie's mom saying this, that people have many ways to be lousy to one another, as you'll find out when you're older, but I think that all bad behavior stems from plain old selfishness, which is first definitely true in this life, but definitely true to Charles Jacobs throughout his life. I think this was Jamie's dad. He said, the Reverend was right about one thing. People always want a reason for the bad things in life. Sometimes there ain't one. Dad truth.
That's what is so dour throughout the entire book. Jamie just puts in these hard one-liners every time he's about to have a scene with us, and it's just, oh my gosh, what is
Dropping
happening?
it on us.
Well, yeah, what is going to happen?
All right. Do you have a list of Easter eggs, Jingles, or I have some?
That's what. You go ahead and do your.
All right. Well, the Dark Tower. The only ones I knew was Gunslingers because I didn't know the title of the book, and Chrome Roses. I think roses play a big part in the Dark Tower. Number 19, as you guys said, was painted all around this book from that one road rocket car. The town Castle Rock was name dropped as a town. I only know it from the like Hulu series Castle Rock. Some books must have been set in there.
Oh, there's at least 12 books. Castle Rock. So for me at the time when I was a kid, Castle Rock was like the talk of the town for King. Like if you're reading Stephen King, you need to read It, which has Derry, or you
Right.
read a Castle Rock book, and that's like Cujo, The
Needful
Dead
Things.
Zone, Needful Things. Like most of his famous ones actually take place in Castle Rock.
So one of the big fictional main towns. Joyland was referenced. The Reverend did his Carney thing in a town in North Carolina, Joyland, which I still have yet to read. I'd like to. Which one of you said you're reading that soon? Jingles?
I'm gonna read it soon. I'm curious if the Rev pops in there at some point.
The Colorado Kid, which takes place in Nederland, Colorado, where Jamie got his job at the ranch place. I wrote Jacob's Ladder. I'm like blanking on when that was name dropped, but I feel like it was. But anyway.
I want to say they called the electricity connecting the bars as it moves up. That's Jacob's Ladder.
Oh, okay.
And kind of this never-ending cycle of going up and up and.
Makes sense. Oh yeah. Jerusalem's Lot, which is a short story that I've read, but that name drops the De Vermis Mysterious, the Book of the Dead, whatever he was using for the power. That pops up in that short story. And so Under the Dome, probably my favorite King book, name drops Chester Mills. It borders on Harlow. That's where this Under the Dome happened. And also, I don't know if this is accurate, but so in this book, there's a kid named Robichaud who crashes that number 19 road rocket. And that's the same last name as a person who crashes into Under the Dome in the opening scenes and dies. And I just wondered if that was him all grown up, also crashing once more after.
That's totally possible.
I know. It's a small one, but God, I would love if that he actually held true to that. If you guys had any other Easter eggs, you would know better than me.
I feel like the Robichauds are just a family that pops up everywhere.
All over.
I don't
all
know.
over him.
Yeah.
It's like that family in what's that Billy Madison movie of those punk kids and their parents are like
the O'Doyles.
O'Doyle
rules.
Yeah. They're like that in Maine, Rivershaws.
Yeah, I like this for the Jerusalem's Lot one. I like that we have that story is pretty Lovecraftian as well because it talks about a worm hiding under a church. And I like that there's like the cliff that we have all of our climax on in this story overlooks Jerusalem's Lot, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah,
but
Jerusalem's Lot has a lot of parallels to this one, I think.
Yeah.
Just as a story in general.
Yeah, I think that covers a lot of them. The one thing I noticed kind of continues to remain true. Stephen King really likes people dying in Plymouths. I don't know what that's about. But the car that Diane is a Plymouth Belvedere, and Christine is a Plymouth Fury. Um,
He must have had a family member who drove them or
yeah,
something
right.
like that.
And then the other one, this is more fan theory. Like I said, I had a couple of these at the end here, but the Great Old Ones could just be a direct reference to H.P. Lovecraft's Great Old Ones, or it could actually be a um, link to a group of people and creatures in the Dark Tower. Um, the Knoll, I'm not really sure how to connect, but Mother is a creature that looks like a spider that feeds off of people's fear and pain. That should sound familiar to a couple of us, right? That's Pennywise. That's another creature, another
Yeah.
creature. Um, but yeah, those are my other ones.
Very nice. Wombat, you have any you noticed? Did we not get them all?
No, Jingles with some deep cuts, and I'm in love with that fan theory. I thought, and I'm not quite sure, but I do suspect that this stuff is tied to the beam somehow, the secret electricity. That's kind of my fan theory. I haven't seen. I tried to find if anyone had come up with this fan theory online, and I'm sure someone has. But in the
No, you're the
annals
first.
of Reddit history and some of the other places I was looking, I couldn't find it. But for my own health, I try to not dabble too hard in any of those places. So
It's so hard sometimes. That's one of the
Yeah.
fun things about Stephen King's. He just doesn't really care that much. I think he likes the idea of name dropping more than actually connecting anything in any
Right.
meaningful way. But I love the idea that this is connected to the beam directly. Uh, yeah, the beams are very mysterious things.
I want King to get. I haven't read a lot of his newer stuff, admittedly, a little behind the times. But this is. I hope we get another King story where he really leans into some of these older horror stories that really inspired him or spooked him out at some point. Because this book was great. I think we're all
I,
high on it, and
Yeah.
people should definitely read it. But it has some of the best of King in those moments, and he's really kind of paying homage to some of the greats.
yeah, and I feel like I wrote this in my notes, but I feel like, this is like he tackles like mortality head on in this book more so than maybe any book he's ever written, I'd say. But it's interesting how early King is like kind of a lot about life cut short, Pet Cemetery, even Carrie, things like that, where, late period King now is really into, life. It's all behind you, and this is kind of all you got. This is that was it kind of thing. And it's like it's just interesting. It's too different from when he was younger in his 30s to old man King, how he kind of ruminates on it. But horrifying, but he's still on top of his game. I mean, this, like I said, was this 10 years ago ish, and he's still
Yeah.
putting stuff out like this in his 70s. Or it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it is one of those things. I don't want to be too insulting, but I really do have like a hard time finding books with older lead characters that I
Mm.
find particularly interesting. But a lot of King's stuff, he always writes to the age that he is, it feels like. And he does it incredibly well. Um, I mean, another recommendation I'd give for King people, if you haven't read them yet, the Bill Hodges trilogy, which is where you get the first kind of introductions of, um, man, why am I forgetting her name now?
Holly.
Holly, yeah, Holly Gibney. Um, you get the introduction of Holly Gibney in there. For those books, Hodges is a retired cop, kind of just dealing with the end of his life, and it's great.
My one King plug here would be Needful Things,
Yeah.
actually.
Okay.
All right.
if you're into, I think a lot of the aspects here, particularly like the ending. If you're a fan of this type of ending or in that vein, um, Needful Things is one of his earlier works, and I feel like I don't hear it talked about a lot, which makes me sad. But um, there's some things to love from Revival that I think show up in that one. So
I'm gonna plug my King plug. Different seasons. Get out of this hellhole of out of this sick, twisted ending and get some uplifting King.
I want to go for the happy stuff.
I mean,
no,
is it Different Seasons that has Apt Pupil in it? 'Cause
it
that
is. That's
Other
true.
than
That
Apt
is a
People,
better one.
skip that one. The other three, marvelous.
That's
Apt
not a happy
People,
story at all.
also one of the darkest ones. Yeah, should say. I'll leave on this. I don't want to depress you guys, but Mike Flanagan had written a script for Revival that he said was the best script he's ever written. That got shelved, unfortunately, and instead he's doing The Dark Tower, which is awesome and stuff. But
Yeah, all right.
right before that, he was about to make a Revival movie, and
I was gonna log off and scream into the void until you told me he was doing The Dark Tower, and I was like, all right, but there's a chance. You're telling me there's a
Okay.
chance.
Mike Flanagan's got plenty of years ahead of him. I gotta imagine Life of Chuck has got to be pushing him right in the trajectory of continuing to do Stephen adaptations for the rest of his career if he wants.
Did Flanagan do Doctor Sleep?
He did.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
he's the King Master.
Oh man, yeah, he's a Revival, and he could do it as I bet he'd do it as a show.
He
Right?
could do it as a show.
like a mini series.
Over the time.
Oh,
yeah.
that'd be incredible.
I would love Mike Flanagan to bring back the 90s style of there's 2 3-hour long episodes.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Made for TV. Yeah, like the Stand one.
Yeah.
All right, we hit 2 hours. Good Lord, 2 hours on Revival. Whoever's with us again, don't listen to this at night, people. Do yourself a favor. Thank you guys for listening, though. I hope you guys have a scary October. Read as much scary books as you can. Take a break from fantasy and sci-fi, or read ones that mix both horror and that stuff. Watch a ton of scary movies. I know all three of us will be doing that as well. And thank you, Craig and the Legendarium, for letting us spitball on here. Thank you, Horizon Brave, for starting the whole thing. Galactic Damages by Jingle Punks is the music. And go check us out on the Legendarium Discord. Come hang with us. Our recommendations are flowing. I know, who's that one author everyone Bob told us? Nat something, that horror writer.
Oh yeah.
Nat Cassidy.
Nat Cassidy. I mean, she's all the rave. Sorry, I don't know if Nat's a girl or a guy, but all the rave right now. This one. So, come hang out with us over there. I'm Yettibeats for Jingles and Wombat. We'll see you later.
Adios.
Bye, everyone.